Yo, what's up guys, it's Talon. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys about some of the most important things to learn in Wild Rift and some of the things that don't really matter quite as much. Basically just what you really should focus on when you're trying to get better at the game and sort of the things you should think about. And so starting off, the first thing that really matters is understanding how your champion works and how to play your champion. That's like always pretty much the number one thing. If you understand how to pilot your individual champion, you can climb even while being quite a bad player. Like there's very frequent times where I'll end up kind of meeting like a new one trick on a certain champion and they'll perform super well every single game, even when I'll see them make consistent stupid mistakes that I just know like they don't really understand the game that well, but they know how to play their champions. I mean, I can even think of people who I play with now who used to not be very good but really understood their champions very well, and I would play with them and then eventually they'd get better at the game and learn. But if you give yourself that initial kind of ability to climb really well by playing these champion, like this individual champion, it allows you to climb quicker. And when you climb quicker, you play against better players and with better players, and then you can learn the game faster. So it's kind of more efficient than trying to get perfect at every single part of the game. Instead, you can again just kind of approach it by trying to learn an individual champion first. And then along those same lines, learning one role at a time is also very valuable. Even for someone like me who now plays, autofill, and I always play any role. The way that I did this was by learning an individual role at a time. I was originally, the first role I hit Challenger on was ADC. I really mained that role, and then eventually switched over to just trying to get Challenger on every single role. And then I played autofill afterwards, but it took me literally like 2 years or a year and a half to get Challenger on all these roles. And then I, after that went about approaching learning every single role. And typically learning roles that fit with your kind of other roles that you play also works well. So for example, a support player should probably understand how to play ADC very well, or jungler should understand how like a soul lane works, these types of things. And then overall, I do think it's really important to understand specifically how jungle works more than other roles. So if you are, any role that's not jungle, you should still put in some amount of effort to learn how the jungle works, whether that's playing it or watching videos on it. And the reason that it's really important to understand how jungle works is because the game really revolves around jungle. The jungle is the one where if you understand where the jungler is pathing, where they're going, then you can make a lot more plays in your lane. You can understand how to play around your jungler, make their game easy, because jungle is the most OP and most valuable role in the game. So understanding that role specifically, that's really an extremely important thing to learn overall. And then lane phase, similarly, is extremely important to understand. Typically, most games, honestly, in solo queue get decided through the lane phase, because if you're just able to completely stomp your laner in lane, then oftentimes they'll give up or start throwing or trolling or other things like this. So it's just very effective if you understand how lane works. And even if you are a jungle player, understanding how the lane works is very valuable because it gives you an easier understanding of when you should be ganking people and things like this. So again, just overall understanding the lane phase and understanding how jungle works are probably two of the most important gameplay things that you could possibly do. After that, another thing that people really lack understanding of is objectives. They just don't know how objectives work or when they're spawning or other things like this. And so understanding, for example, that you need to make sure that you get priority before an objective spawns, say 30 seconds before an objective, and be very aware of this. That's something that a lot of people don't do, and having that awareness of when an objective is spawning and understanding that the objective is significantly more important than any individual kill or anything like that is something that most people don't understand and that they need to start understanding. Again, one thing I'll see pretty frequently is the enemy jungler will go on the bottom side of the map right as Baron is spawning on the top side. And what this does is it of course makes it very likely that the enemy can sneak a Baron on them as they're distracting themselves by trying to get a kill on the bottom side that doesn't really matter, doesn't really do anything. Which kind of leads into my next point as well, which is just how frequently people will ARAM or focus on things that don't really matter. So again, and if an objective is not spawning, then there's no reason to be in mid lane if your entire team is in mid lane, because now you're all getting only that gold from that one wave. You're not getting the top lane wave, you're not getting the bot lane wave, and so this lack of gold is obviously going to be very problematic for you, generally speaking. If you just don't have very much gold and you're all stuck in one lane, then half the time you're going to win the fight because it's going to be a 50-50 in mid lane for the fight, but half the time you're going to lose it too, generally speaking, and so that's not going to lead to an overall better win rate. That's just going to mean that sometimes you win the fight, sometimes you lose them. But if you're able to consistently create advantages through the side lane gold, through getting yourself gold, and playing around the side lanes and the objectives, then you'll actually be able to climb, and that's again a big thing that a lot of people don't understand. And then one thing that people often ask me how important it is how important itemization is. they'll always ask me, do I need to learn how to build really well? Do I need to understand all of the items in the game or all these types of things? And of course, understanding how items work will allow you to climb better and is important. But generally speaking, you don't need to know how every item works perfectly, and it's not going to make the biggest impact on your overall outcomes. Generally speaking, if you're able to understand how the core items for your champion work and you build very similar items every game, you'll probably be fine. However, some of the main things that you do need to keep in mind for itemization are anti-heal and resistances. If you understand how anti-heal works, then you're probably going to be pretty good, because again, if the enemy has Soraka or Mundo or other champions like this, you do need to know about the anti-heal items, and you need to build those in the correct scenarios, because that will actually matter. And every anti-heal item has an anti-heal component, which is the one that you really need to build. You don't necessarily need to build the full item right away. It just matters that you're building the component early on to, counteract the healing on the enemy team. And then resistances, of course, if the enemy are full AP, you need to build a lot of magic resist, or if they're full AD, you need to build a lot of armor. And so understanding these two concepts for itemization are the main things that actually matter. A lot of the other parts of itemization, they're generally not very relevant. Another common misconception that people have is that KDA and stats really matter in the game. And don't get me wrong, if you're consistently averaging 10 plus kills in a game, you're probably playing better than the average player, and again, people will frequently tell me like, oh, my teammates are doing really bad and I'm getting SVP over and over again, it's just my teammates' fault, whatever. And again, there can be some truth to this because of things like variance. Sometimes you do get a stretch of bad games, but the reality is, like, mistakes are different for each person. Sometimes I will coach someone who seems to be like a really solid player compared to the people in their rank, but they just don't know how to close out games. They don't understand, after they get the Baron, or after they get the Elder rather, they won't go for the Baron, they'll go straight for the end. And then a lot of times then they might throw a game, or, just a number of other random things might happen that lead to them ending up losing games even when they're playing really well. And just a lot of people don't understand various factors like this, and then they'll blame other things. And again, stats depend on the champion you're playing. Obviously, you're going to have a better KDA if you're playing an enchanter and sitting in the backline just healing your teammates all the time, compared to if you're playing a really aggressive tank champion. And again, playing for KDA, sometimes it's better to die than it is to stay alive longer. And so again, generally speaking, you can look at stats to sort of tell whether or not you're playing well, but people put way too much emphasis on this, and then it really causes them to kind of make a lot of excuses or not find ways to improve. And so I think that's a very big mistake that a lot of people kind of do as well. And then they'll also think that every individual game matters, and they won't understand sort of variance. So again, something that is very important to learn is to understand that every player in the game will have insane loss streaks. I think this season I probably had like an 8 or 9 game loss streak at some point. Every single season I have, a loss streak of 5 to 10 games straight. And some of these times I'm playing really well, and it's really not my fault for a majority of the games. But the reality is that sometimes you just get bad luck, and that's normal. It's not always, matchmaking specifically doing this to you. Sometimes it's just bad luck. Because even if we were in a perfect matchmaking system, which obviously we're not, you would still have plenty of games where you get bad luck and you just happen to have people who underperform. I mean, think about it, right? You guys have all probably played really bad in games before. I've played really bad in plenty of games. And that doesn't mean that, that's not matchmaking's fault. Maybe overall my stats are good and, they should think that I'm going to play well. The matchmaking should think that, but it just doesn't end up happening. And so just understanding that variance is a very large part of the game is something that a lot of people don't understand and can definitely help you. So that's something to keep in mind just for mindset. It sort of helps you understand that. And then another thing that you should learn that's more gameplay related is you should learn how individual champions work to the best of your ability. You don't need to understand every small passive and how the champions work perfectly, but you should understand how each ability on every champion works. It's very important to understand something like this because then you can actually react properly to them. And so typically playing some ARAM actually helps you with this because you have to play a lot of random champions, or just going into a PvP and just playing one game of a champion who you have no idea how it works, or watching a YouTube video on it. These types of things can actually help you understand the game quite well. So that's another important thing. One of the most important things as well that people don't understand is win conditions in Wild Rift. So they really need to understand better how you can actually win a game. For example, if you're support and your ADC is 0-2, but your top laner is 3-0, well, you really need to understand that playing around your top laner for the rest of that game is going to be the way to win. And you're not going to win through just sitting around your ADC who's probably very bad at the game the whole time. Or understanding that you need to be killing, the fed AD carry who has 14,000 gold instead of targeting that tank who has 8,000 gold on the team. These types of things, I do it sometimes, everyone does it sometimes, but this is definitely like one of the biggest mistakes as well. And then like kind of similar thing is keeping track of key abilities. So people often won't be aware of, for example, I need to be aware of the Malphite ult, and I need to make sure I flash that Malphite ult in the fight, or these other random things. So just keeping track of abilities better is another big mistake that people frequently make. But yeah, overall, those are just a lot of random mistakes and things that people need to learn in Wild Rift. So I just thought I'd make a video sort of giving you guys some of the most important things so you could understand maybe, you know, whatever of these things you're not really doing or not really, you know, focusing on, you could try to think about more improving. I hope you guys enjoyed the video though. As always, I do coaching for $15 an hour. So if you're interested in that, just DM me on Discord, Talon1169, or through the link in the description, and I'll see you guys in the next video.